All right, now if-then statements we saw earlier can be a little bit in disguise. Sometimes the then is implied, but they can even be even more in disguise with both the if and the then being gone. And I wanted to show you some examples of that because this happens in everyday language quite a bit. So let's look at the statements below, and we're going to rewrite each of them as an if-then with the if part first, because we're used to seeing that in terms of how we think about true and falseness with if-then statements. All right, first example. I will have dessert tonight if I go to the gym today. Notice the if comes at the end of the sentence. The first part of the sentence is an implied then. So if I were to write this with the if first, I would say if I go to the gym today, then I will have dessert. Tonight. So we're actually writing the if first, and the then, instead of being implied, is actually written down. Example 2, all turtles have shells. This is an if-then in disguise. Anytime you have a sentence that begins with all, you have probably an if-then statement implied. When we say all, we actually mean if whatever comes first happens, if it is a turtle, then we have the second part, the conclusion, then it has a shell. All statements that begin with all can be rewritten in this if-then structure. If it is a turtle, then it has a shell. All turtles have shells. You can do that with every as well. All and every are just synonyms of each other. Every square is a rectangle. If it is a square, then it is a rectangle. Okay, so all statements and every statement, right, in other words, a statement with every at the beginning, both can be written as if-then statements. Last example here, I will go to the store when I'm out of milk. Well, when is a replacement sometimes for if. So I'm saying if I'm out of milk, then I will go to the store. So there's an implied if-then here as well, even though if and then don't appear. If I am out of milk, then I will go to the store. So if-then statements are frequently in disguise. A lot of times people do it just to make it easier to write things down. It's certainly easier to write all turtles have shells than to write if it is a turtle, then it has a shell. So it's pretty common for this to happen. Can we swap the propositions in an if-then statement and still have a true statement? Well, let's look at an example. The animal is a hawk, then the animal is a bird. So we have an if-then with two propositions within it. What if I switched the order of those? And so I said, if the animal is a bird, then the animal is a hawk. Let's talk about whether that would have the same truth value. Well, the original statement said if the animal is a hawk, then the animal is a bird. Well, a hawk is a type of bird. So if the animal is a hawk, then for sure it's a type of bird. So the original statement was true. The new statement, though, when I rearranged it, if the animal is a bird, then the animal is a hawk, that doesn't make as much sense because there are lots of birds that are not hawks. So maybe the bird, the animal that we're referring to, is a sparrow. Then the conclusion would not be that the animal is a hawk. So what we have is a statement that by reversing it ends up being false. It turns out when you reverse the location of the two propositions in an if-then statement, you will not necessarily continue to have a true statement, or at least have the same truth value. Now, sometimes you can. It depends on the situation, but you aren't guaranteed that you will still have a true statement or a statement that has the same truth value. So it's important that you do not automatically reverse the propositions in an if-then. It's not a good idea to ever do that. Now, that said, there is a way that you can reverse if you do something else. There's something called a contrapositive in mathematics and in logic. The contrapositive of a conditional statement, it turns out, will always have the same truth value as the original statement. In other words, if the original statement was true, then the contrapositive will be true, and if the original statement is false, then the contrapositive will be false. And the contrapositive is a way of reversing the two propositions and their location in the if-then, but when you reverse, so here you see I'm reversing where A and B are, you have to negate at the same time. So if my original statement was if A, then B, my contrapositive statement would be if not B, then not A. As long as I reverse and negate, spelled reverse wrong initially. If I reverse and negate, I will still have a true statement. But I have to do both of them. So let's look at the example up above. If I reverse, I would say if the animal's a bird, but I'm going to negate it at the same time. If the animal is not a bird, then, and then I'm going to say the animal is not a hawk. So I have negated both statements in addition to reversing them. I have to negate and I have to reverse to get a true statement. And if you look at this scenario now, it does make sense. If the animal is not a bird, there's no way it can be a hawk, right? Because hawks are birds. So the contrapositive of a conditional statement will always have the same truth value. Let's look at a couple of examples just to see how this works and how we would rewrite them. So if you ever do want to switch the location of the propositions in an if-then, you just have to negate at the same time. So if it rains, then the game will be canceled. A good way to do this is to start at the end. If the game is not canceled, so I'm reversing that, the game is not canceled, then instead of saying it rains, I say it didn't rain. Okay, so I've reversed and I've negated. Number two, if you are not late, then you get a coffee. So again, I start at the back. If you do not get a coffee, so I have to negate. At the same time that I'm reversing the order. If you do not get a coffee, then you are late. So I'm negating the original if part that was you are not late by saying you are late. So I'm taking the not away to negate. So if you do not get a coffee, then you are late. So the contrapositive will always have the same truth value. And it's a way to reverse where the propositions are in an if-then statement as long as you negate at the same time. You can only reverse them if you negate.